All right, welcome into Surviving Paradise, the podcast that takes a sometimes serious, oftentimes humorous look at the claim by Jehovah's Witnesses that they are living in a modern day spiritual paradise. I am your host, Stacy Bauman, former elder ministerial servant, and the only badge I claim a kid raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses throughout the 70s and the 80s. Welcome in. As I do like to issue a warning. It's quite a journey through the spiritual paradise of God's guys in New York. We try to have some fun here. There's a lot of healing. Each episode features sarcasm, humor, and my own set of observations. But please note, it's never meant to offend. We're having some fun, creating some community, and talking shop as a former Jehovah's Witness. And this week, I got to tell you, I want to discuss what is one of my all-time favorite subjects when it comes to Jehovah's Witnesses. And I know that I'm prone to hyperbole, dramatics. I've probably used that phrase one too many times on this show, but truly, this is one of my favorite subjects and indicators during my time and post-time as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. It's right up there with things like New Light, universal sovereignty, and of course, the flood of Noah's Day that gets a lot of play on this show. I wonder if it'll show up this week. There's a chance. What is that subject? I want to dive into the subject of urgency. What does it mean to be urgent? What does the concept of urgency mean to you? What emotions does it create? What actions does it create in you when I say this is urgent? I'm not talking about an email. I'm talking about life events. This is urgent. Urgency. And I'm going to go back to my Jehovah's Witness training for a few minutes, and I'm going to answer it from my end with an illustration. I know, I got good on that in the Theocratic Ministry School. And it's an illustration that has likely been used a million times by Jehovah's Witnesses. You likely heard it in a Kingdom Hall, at a public talk, or on a convention, but it's just oh so good when you're trying to capture the definition of urgency. So if you're able to, and safely can, I should say, close your eyes for a moment. And again, only if it's safe. Please don't do this if you're driving, please. And take a walk with me for a few minutes through the spiritual paradise of Jehovah's Witnesses when it comes to urgency. You look out the window of your home, and your neighbor's house is on fire. Can you hear it? The crackling, the booming? Can you feel it, the heat coming off their house that's starting to burn to the ground? Can you smell it? That smell of wood, or maybe it's those drapes you've admired from across the street or next door that you always wanted. They're on fire. Can you smell it all? It's burning. It's red hot, and it's lighting up the night sky. You can hear your neighbor and his family inside the house. Some of them are screaming for help. Some are still sleeping in the back rooms. You can see them through the window. You can hear the family dog barking. The house itself is a loss, but people are in it. They're in there. You're watching it light up the neighborhood, the night sky. You can smell it. You can feel the heat, but there's people in there. How do you feel? In all honesty, what emotions start popping as you smell the second floor light up? Will you watch or will you react? Who are you? Who am I in this moment? Am I brave? Am I terrified? What am I going to do? Do you just call the fire department, or do you just go back to Netflix? It's not your house that's on fire. Or are you running toward the door screaming to the people inside? Do you try to help them? Do you try to save them? Do you grab your garden hose? What do? You have a choice now You can watch or you can act. It's all very urgent. And the emotions that you're overcome with is a sense of urgency. Or you could just sit back down on the couch. Our entire lives revolve around urgency or complacency. Wouldn't you agree? Nobody's urgent to pay their taxes. It's kind of a little more on the complacent side until it's time. And nowhere is that more true than if you were lucky enough to be chosen to be a Jehovah's Witness. In most cases, we were born into it, right? There are those folks out there that actually accepted a Bible study and later became a Jehovah's Witness, but nowhere are you luckier than being just one of 8 million people today that were just chosen magically to be a Jehovah's Witness. A Jehovah's Witness is supposed to awaken every morning with a sense of urgency. Because guess what, folks? The world is on fire. People are going to die, and the clock is working against you. Or should I say, us. Look no further than what King Jesus of Jehovah's Witnesses, since 1914, tells his people at Matthew chapter 24, where his sole purpose of the entire conversation was to create a sense of urgency in his disciples and apostles, the first of Jehovah's Witnesses. In his discussion of Jerusalem's impending destruction, an account Jehovah's Witnesses are constantly and regularly told is really about the planet and about our time. Don't get me started. Jesus ramps up urgency. Feel free to follow along or read it in your own Bible. Might I recommend the New World Translation so you know it came from the 9 guys in New York. In teaching his disciples all things urgency, he says things like this regarding destruction that could happen any second now. I want to underline that. When you're discussing urgency and what it means to you, whether it's something else in life or as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, this disastrous impending doom could happen any second now. I might not even be able to finish this podcast episode. Any second. But Jesus says in Matthew 24, verses 35 and 36, he first gives us the guarantee that should get you feeling very urgent if you're a Jehovah's Witness. He says, quote, "Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will by no means pass away." End quote. He goes on to say, concerning that day and hour, nobody knows, neither the angels of the heavens nor the Son, but only the Father. End quote. Always thought it was odd he was talking about himself in the third person as the Son. Doesn't matter, subject for another day. But you get the point. That should get the attention of anyone who reads the Bible, but most especially a Jehovah's Witness, as they are watching the neighbor's house burn to the ground. Heaven and earth will pass away, but what Jesus tells them in this chapter will not. And it's interesting, Jesus doesn't even know when it's happening, but it's going to happen any second now. This all lands in a bucket known as urgency. This is very urgent. Verse 37 continues, "For just as the days of Noah were," God, there he is, he snuck in, "so the presence of the Son of Man will be." Ah, Noah. He's back. Well, we know how that one ended, even for toddlers and puppies. It wasn't a lot of fun. Okay, I'm feeling uncomfortably urgent now, right? And finally, in verse 43 and 44, Jesus says, "But know one thing. If the householder had known in what watch the thief was coming, he would have kept awake and not allowed his house to be broken into. On this account, You too prove yourselves ready, because the Son of Man is coming at an hour that you do not think to be it. Jesus, with an illustration of his own. A thief is going to break into your house. If you knew that, wouldn't you be sitting up awake on the couch waiting for him? Urgency. Urgency, urgency, urgency. High alert. And wow, Jesus takes the time to teach us in this chapter what it means to be urgent if you're a Jehovah's Witness. And that urgency should shape our lives. The message continues on in the Bible by the warm and fuzzy Apostle Paul when he himself says at 1 Thessalonians 5:2, quote, "For you yourselves know very well that Jehovah's day is coming exactly as a thief in the night," end quote. Thieves don't tend to announce they're coming, but he's coming. And the sense you should feel in your stomach, your solar plexus, and your entire life is one of urgency if you're a Jehovah's Witness. The message is apparent. You must be consumed with that feeling, the way that you would feel if a thief was breaking into your home. You can't rest. You must be vigilant. But it's far more important to get how Jehovah feels, and Jesus, I should say, feels about urgency. He didn't mince his words. His people would in fact be consumed with it, just like he was. He demonstrated it in his life when he visited the planet. It's a lot like my opening illustration. Your neighbor's house is burning to the ground. You can smell it, you can feel it, you can see it. And there's innocent people inside. Your emotions should be an all-encompassing sense of urgency if you're a Jehovah's Witness. Period. It's undeniable. Undeniable. And listen, if you don't believe that and you want to get it from another source because Jesus and Paul didn't get you up and moving, you're not motivated, the governing body, his chosen guys, are here to remind us all about urgency. From the February 1st, pages 92 through 95 article, They Feel the Urgency, we are given this counsel from Jesus' 9 guys. They apparently were listening. It says, quote, "Thrilling, absolutely thrilling. Now I can imagine what Pentecost 33 CE must have been like. Something we have been looking for years. The end of this system of things is very, very close, and we all know it. Thus, have some observers at the Brooklyn headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses expressed themselves. About what? About the recent increases in the activity of their fellow witnesses in every part of the earth. God's servants everywhere keenly feel the spirit of urgency that is now surging throughout their ranks in this most momentous time in man's history." It continues, quote, "It seems that suddenly, in every part of the earth, people are awakening to the crucial and terrifying problems plaguing this generation, and many realize that only God can solve them. They want to know what His Word says. As a result, persons who have never taken the time to read the Bible study literature of Jehovah's Witnesses are reading it now, and thousands more are attending their meetings." End quote. Thank you, governing body. Thrilling indeed. Absolutely thrilling. The sense of urgency, the sense of terror in people is driving people to Jehovah's Witnesses. But listen, a small diversion. Are you ready for this? The sarcasm starts early in this episode. Did you notice that I didn't give you the date of that reference? Would you be interested in knowing that the message I just read to you in print on their website, this message of thrilling urgency, was printed in 1969, 54 years ago. Very urgent indeed. A small preview of the urgency we are now going to discuss and dive into among Jehovah's Witnesses. But I mentioned early that This is one of my favorite subjects, or ponderings, or meditations during my time as a J-dub. So much so that I found myself literally taking offense at times. And if I'm being honest, it still irritates me when I observe the hypocrisy of Jehovah's Witnesses. It blows my mind. It irritates the hell out of me when I see one of their book cards. I resented that at the time I was a witness, was doing all I could at times, and it still wasn't urgent enough if the world was ending any second. Trust me, it wasn't urgent enough. I was doing other things in life. But I found myself resentful when I observed others had about as much urgency as a slug. And I can't begin to tell you how much I thought about this. This is, as I mentioned, one of my favorite subjects in my top 5. I'm surprised it's taken me this long to get around to it. And I thought about this entirely too much and how it created in me personally a world of questions that seeped into every part of my life as a Jehovah's Witness. It was always there at the forefront. I've long observed with a sense of confusion, and as odd as it sounds, sometimes a sense of personal guilt. What I believe is a bizarre relationship between Jehovah's Witnesses and the claim and the command from their king that their life be filled with urgency. As a kid and even as an adult, I often wondered what we were all doing. What are we doing? I'd sit in a kingdom hall, I'd go to school, I'd go to the convention, and I'd think, what the hell are we doing? Why were we going to school? Why are we holding down jobs? Why are we buying houses? Why are people getting married? Or anything else? If at the soul level in our hearts, we truly believed with urgency that Armageddon could begin at any moment. What were we doing? It didn't make sense. To this day, it doesn't make sense. And let me ask at this point, was I alone? Did you ever experience those moments where you looked around during the meeting or at any other part of your life as a witness and wonder why we were all looking almost half asleep at times? If we urgently believed that everyone around us was about to die, how were we going about everyday life like they weren't? My brain, from the time I was a kid, could never put this together. How could it be, I should say, that we believed everyone we knew was about to die, as in a burning building, but here I was just underlining my watchtower on Sunday. This bothered me more than I can even begin to explain. Something didn't add up. And look, my observation that Jehovah's Witnesses weren't remotely urgent about the world ending was not without lots and lots of proof. There's lots of ways to point and observe that Jehovah's Witnesses have the urgency level of a small snail. So let's consider what I think in my own time as a witness, from childhood to elderhood, and then exit. Let's consider the main areas of a Jehovah's Witness life that are dripping in urgency's arch enemy, otherwise known as complacency. This is my take. So, walk with me now. Let's start randomly. What is urgency, or a sense of urgency, the one that Jesus told a witness to have and to be fed by and to live by? What does it look like at congregation meetings or at their conventions and their assemblies? Let's start there. Take a look, and this is going to be very relatable to anyone likely interesting. Take a look at their weekly schedule or just attend one meeting. For those of us that grew up going to 3 meetings a week at the time and then a day of field service, so 4 of your 7 days were just locked in urgency, we have plenty of material to draw from when it comes to whether or not they're urgent. As you look back, or listen, want to state right here, or if you're still attending meetings, you can just feel the electricity of urgency in the air when you attend a meeting, can't you? No? You can't? Why not? The world's about to end. The neighbor's house is on fire. Everyone is going to be dead soon unless they get on board, and meetings of Jehovah's Witnesses is where you want everyone to be anyway, so they too can learn and be saved, and then get others to come to the meeting so that person can learn and be saved, so they teach people who can come to the meeting to learn and be... Oh, wait a minute. What do we have here? On second look, we've got an interesting scheme, don't we? And as I was considering this subject, I was reminded, okay, I'm going off the rails. Warning, 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 warning. I'm going off the rails. I was reminded of the scene in Independence Day. Do you remember the movie? I don't even remember how old it is. Where Bill Pullman, he's the president of the United States, he gives his epic speech to the crowd about this fight that they are jumping into, this fight for survival. They're going to fight the aliens that are invading planet Earth, and he's upstanding in front of the crowd giving this speech. And well, how in all my years as a Jehovah's Witness, never once witnessed a public talk or a convention part that was even nearly as inspiring as Bill Pullman's speech in Independence Day. And it certainly wasn't as urgent. You might remember the gist of the speech. It so happens I have it. He says there, quote, and see if you can correlate this and where my mind goes. Quote, perhaps it's fate that today is 4th of July and you will once again be fighting for our freedom. Not from tyranny, oppression, or persecution, but from annihilation. We're fighting for our right to live, to exist. We will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight. We're going to live on. We're going to survive. End quote. The crowd goes nuts. Urgency. We've got a fight on our hands, and we're here to fight and save lives. I personally, after seeing Independence Day, was ready to fight alongside Will Smith. And look, mostly because he was kissing Vivica Fox, but nonetheless, it fired you up. And well, that was just aliens coming down from the sky through the clouds, backed by a superpower, armed with weapons to annihilate mankind. Nothing like Armageddon will be, as featured by Jehovah's Witnesses. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Hold up. I think you get the point. Mankind is on the clock. Everyone is about to die. Could be a fireball, could be a Stephen Lett facial expression that kills you. It doesn't matter. These are very urgent times, the most urgent of times in all of human history. And well, when was the last meeting of Jehovah's Witnesses that you attended that felt urgent, vital, important? When? Did you sense the elder on stage had prepared his part as if lives were on the line? That every word he delivered to the audience could mean life or death for just one precious soul? Come on now. Come on now. I was at a congregation where elders regularly were caught winging their parts. I remember some forgot that they even had a part until it was announced at the service meeting, and I'll never forget the look of panic as they stood up and walked towards the stage, trying to come up with something to talk about for 15 minutes. The guy didn't even know he had a part. He apparently had a real sense of urgency regarding the meeting that night, right? I gotta tell you, I miss those days. I just miss it. I remember him, one of them by name, and I'll never forget it. But look, meetings of Jehovah's Witnesses are not only void of any sense of urgency, but they're downright boring. Most of them are painfully boring. Painfully boring. The same stuff regurgitated over and over again, trying to come up with a new fancy illustration. Guys that can drive minivans around for 10 hours a month, entrusted with taking a microphone and reminding us all that everyone is going to die. But I've run out of clever illustrations, and this is just another service marketing part on return visits. I got nothing. Let's all get through this, I should say, together, and let's just go home. I'm sure he was very concerned about everyone in our congregation's territory and giving the rest of us life-saving instructions and things to teach to them, right? Does that sound like a description of a meeting that you attended as a kid or as an adult among Jehovah's Witnesses? The epicenter of how to save lives. Imagine coming to Jesus personally, and I'm sorry I'm off the rails on this entire episode because it's absurd, but imagine coming to Jesus personally and telling him that you want to live forever. Where can I get life-saving instructions? And he points you to your local congregation meeting. Imagine that. You enter, only to find the crowd in a near coma, mothers wrestling restless kids, teenagers looking at their phones, and this is the only place on earth you're going to find a group of people urgently teaching others. Come on. I'm going to boldly say that there isn't a former or present Jehovah's Witness that thinks any one of their weekly meetings features a sense of urgency. And they certainly don't leave meetings with an overwhelming sense of urgency. They all just want to get home and rip off their ties and stockings. They've had enough. They made it through another one with Brother Boring on stage. But let's let the governing body and Jesus guys tell us in their own words from the throne of Jesus to the governing body. Here we go. From the Kingdom Ministry of September 1991, page 4, part 3, titled Congregation Book Study Arrangement, a Center for Field Ministry. Pay attention to that title. I think you know where this is going. They tell us this, quote, "We want to help one another to be effective in preaching the good news and making disciples. Worsening world conditions testify to the urgency of this work. Lives are involved, and Jehovah is speeding up the ingathering. As we keep in mind the ministry given to us, we will work closely with our congregation book study group to accomplish our assignment fully while exhorting and encouraging one another." End quote. Kingdom Ministry, September 91, Congregation Book Study, a Center for Field Ministry. Friends, the times we're living in are so urgent. The house is on fire. Lives are at stake, and Jehovah is speeding it all up. You're no doubt losing sleep just thinking about all of this. But look, not to worry. We have a meeting that Jesus provided that is the center for saving lives. It's called the Congregation Book Study. And well, as of 2023, it no longer exists. It was the center of this urgent, life-saving work, but well, this urgency stuff is kind of exhausting, and while each passing second means more lives lost, we decided to mothball the Center for Field Ministry. It really makes that whole thief in the night thing seem a little off, doesn't it? It's unbelievable. And for those of us that grew up on the book study, which needs its own episode, trust me, it's gone. It's gone. It was the center of saving lives. A whole lot of urgency in these meetings. I'm open to discussing with any Jehovah's Witness, past or present, where they have a sense of urgency at meetings or conventions. I will say the one area urgency is palpable is when one of the governing body gets up there and says they're not asking for money. but then deliver an entire talk asking for money. You do actually feel a sense of urgency in that talk. Or is it desperation? I'll let you be the judge. That's where you feel the greatest urgency at a meeting or convention. But in the end, the question is this: with lives on the line, doesn't it seem reasonable that the congregation meetings and conventions would be centers of urgent activity? If you've ever seen a hospital ER staff deploy aid during a war or rescue operations, it's noticeable. You can feel it. You can feel the urgency. At any meeting of Jehovah's Witnesses, the only substantial feel of urgency is for it all to be over. You've heard how important return visits are millions of times, and one more demonstration on how to hand out a watchtower just doesn't seem to move you anymore. There is zero sense of spiritual urgency at meetings. And it goes without saying that the meeting schedule dominates the life of a Jehovah's Witness. It should be overflowing with emotion, with urgency. And look, they're not. They're not. As I would contemplate this, I couldn't myself personally get away from the fact that meetings are a program from Jesus Christ himself, the same one who gave us Matthew chapter 24. He personally has overseen this urgent work since 1914. Why is Jesus and his teachers so laid back and oftentimes ill-prepared with lives on the line? I started drifting back to when I was a kid. Do you remember how our parents kept us involved as kids, at least in my generation? I'm wondering if I'm alone in this. I know I can't be. They would give us a little piece of paper at the beginning of the meeting with words on it, like Jehovah, or Jesus, or paradise. And we were supposed to listen to each part and count and keep track every time that word was said. We'd mark it in the column with a little line. Ah, yes, learning urgency from a young age. Or was it all designed to keep us from falling asleep, or in my case, drawing mustaches on the illustrations in our books or watchtower? Guilty. Guilty. I did it. And full confession, I like to draw swords and axes through the bad guys' heads. In the publications, I got to tell you, poor Adam. He saw my wrath on more than one illustration. Poor Adam. Imagine my shock when in a moment of weakness as a grown man, I found myself doing that at a meeting as a grown man because, well, I was overcome with urgency during another service meeting part about cleaning the Kingdom Hall, and I just couldn't get excited for it. The meetings and conventions and assemblies of Jehovah's Witnesses are a petri dish for how disengaged, disassociated, and downright complacent Jehovah's Witnesses are in these never-ending last days. And look, it's no big deal. It's just our lives and the lives of billions of people. Who can get excited about that, right? Let's move on to another form of urgency that constantly hit me in the face and I contemplated far too often. What does urgency look like in the preaching work? In field service, pioneering, special missionaries, the preaching work. I'll say it over and over again today. Jehovah's Witnesses as an organization exist, and by extension, I might add, we're all still living with Satan, misery, and death because there are lives to be saved. Jehovah, or so we're told by the governing body, isn't quite ready to kill everyone yet. There must be at least one person, just one, it only takes one, remember those talks, who hasn't heard the truth yet, or in an odd twist, there must be a person that hasn't even been born yet, remember Jehovah sees embryos, that needs to hear the message. It's the only reason we're all still here. And how do I say this? I'll say it bluntly. Nowhere should urgency be more apparent than when it comes to the preaching work. A Jehovah's Witness will look you in the eye and tell you that their entire life or lives center around loving Jehovah and preaching, saving lives, preaching. And then when you ask them, wow, that's so noble, that's incredible, how many hours are you personally preaching every month? Awkward, awkward. Prepare for a look of embarrassment and a quick exit from the conversation. It defines what the cool kids describe today as cringe. It's cringy. Just ask a witness. This is urgent. The neighbor's house is on fire. There's some kids in there, a puppy. The parents, what are you doing to save him? How long do you work at this? I gotta go. Forget the meetings, if you will. Those meetings and the very air in their lungs only exist to keep them out in the world preaching this good news of the kingdom. Good news whose main headline is, God is going to kill you all unless you agree with me and become like me. And look, I got to say it right here. I am personally throwing myself under the bus at this point. I hated field service. I despised it, and I love people, but I hated it. I would rather do almost anything than field service. I despised it, and I know I'm not alone in that regard. Many, if not most, Jehovah's Witnesses hate field service. But again, it's the only reason that we were a Jehovah's Witness, and it's the only reason we are the world's one true religion when we were a witness, remember? It's the one thing every witness will point to. How do you know you have the truth, as you say? Because we alone are preaching this good news of the kingdom. So you would expect to see a hurricane of urgency as we work to save mankind, right? We should see Jehovah's Witnesses launching themselves from bed on a Saturday morning. If they even slept at all, they were so concerned. Jesus, Peter, Andrew, and Sam Hurd are about to kill the neighbor kid, and I must save him. That's why I'm here. Urgency. Preaching. If you thought the meetings were bad, when it comes to measuring how urgent it all is, field service takes the cake. Repeatedly knocking on the doors of empty homes or people ignoring you from behind the drapes, telling them the same thing over and over and over again, all in the hope that you can get them to those urgent meetings we just discussed so they too can join you in this urgent field service. There just isn't enough time today. This deserves its own discussion all by itself. That urgency ain't there. But to feel for how urgent a Jehovah's Witness should feel about their main commission in life, we get this. The Watchtower Study Edition, October 2013, under the subheading article, Jesus was never off duty. Something I thought about constantly as I watched Jehovah's Witnesses. We get this, quote, Jesus' example is noteworthy in that he never considered himself to be off duty. He preached to everyone he encountered, be it a tax collector he passed on the road or a woman he met at a well during a midday pause. Even when he set aside time to relax, Jesus ungrudgingly abandoned his plans in order to teach others. Compassion for his neighbors caused him to offer more than a token witness. End quote. I love it. I'm here simply reading and repeating their words. Jesus was never off duty when it came to saving lives. Even when he was relaxing, as the paragraph tells us, he would change his plans to save others. And he would never, ever offer a token witness, as the paragraph written with Holy Spirit tells us. But, well, you know where this is going. Here we go again. First, never, ever come between a Jehovah's Witness and a happy hour or a glass of wine. If anyone listening thinks the majority of baptized Jehovah's Witnesses are going to give up a vacation or have a meal interrupted or anything else that they planned on because you want to understand what an overlapping generation is so you too can live in paradise with them and their pandas, you can forget it. This is one of the best quotes in all their literature. Never would Jesus just keep going. He would stop whatever he was doing. He would break plans. He would never just give a token witness. Try that with a Jehovah's Witness. Try it. This is just way, way too good. You can really witness a palpable sense of ramped up urgency when the elders is making field service car groups. Remember that? Everyone fighting to get into that minivan so they can get out there and save lives. Everyone fully prepared like a fireman running into that burning neighbor's house with an inspiring message that will save their neighbor's life. Fully educated on that life-saving Watchtower article that will be their placement, that will make a difference because they read it themselves, right? They always study beforehand, right? Brothers and sisters with serious looks on their faces, knowing they're about to be paired up and sent out to save lives this Saturday morning. Doesn't matter who they're paired up with, right? Every person in that car taking direction from the guy in charge with his little territory map, enduring that other brother's BO or bad breath in the back seat, enduring 4 people smashed into that back seat, enduring anything to save lives that will end any second, right? What? Wait a minute. You didn't experience any of that in your time as a Jehovah's Witness in the field service? No? We heard what Jesus did. He broke and did everything. In order to give a witness, it couldn't be a token witness. Couldn't just be a magazine placement, a magazine you've never read. That would never happen, right? But when it comes to urgently saving lives, I know, look, I can feel you rolling your eyes already. But Jehovah's Witnesses, the Bible, and Jesus himself tell us that when it comes to urgently saving lives, they like to tell us to look at Noah. You remember him, right? Dude gets a lot of play on this show. Noah is one of my guys. So let's let the governing body once again tell us how urgent the preaching work is by looking at Noah, my guy. In the Watchtower Study Edition, December 15th, 2003, under the article, Our Watchfulness Takes on Greater Urgency, we get this, quote, it is reasonable to assume that Jehovah feels about the present world as he felt about the pre-flood world. Since he brought an end to the ungodly world of Noah's day, he will certainly destroy the wicked world of today. Having a clear understanding of the parallel between that time and our day should fortify our conviction that the end of the present world is near. End quote. It goes on to say, warned of things not beheld is the subheading. Question, paragraph 6 reads like this. What did Jehovah determine to do in Noah's day? Same article, back to the answer, quote, in Noah's day, Jehovah declared, my spirit shall not act toward man indefinitely, and that he is also flesh. Accordingly, his days shall amount to 120 years. Genesis 6:3 in the Bible. The quote, the issuance, of this divine decree in 2490 BCE marked the beginning of the end for that ungodly world. Just think what that meant for those then living. Only 120 years more, and Jehovah would bring the deluge of waters upon the earth to bring to ruin all flesh, in which the force of life is active from under the heavens. End quote. What a comment by the governing body on preaching and urgency. And look, poor Noah. Poor Noah, my guy Noah. No meetings or even a Bible to remind him of how urgent it all was. But, well, at least he got a timetable. That's kind of interesting. He had 120 years at this point. Not a lot of time to witness to every precious soul, while at the same time trying to manage that giraffe and elephant you have on a leash on your way back to the ark. You just had to stop to do some informal witnessing, a lot like Jesus. He broke his plans to witness. But it's Noah, a 500-plus-year-old husband and father, zoologist, and engineer, that set the tone for Jehovah's Witnesses and urgency. If you thought saving lives was hard while holding down a full-time job, or being a single parent, or just being a teenager navigating puberty and going to school, I'm here to tell you, quit your bitching and toughen up. This is an urgent work, says the governing body. Be like Noah. He was a real guy after all. His story is filled with urgency. And no, he wasn't part of the Marvel universe. He was just a guy, not a superhero. A guy who understood urgency. And again, as a Jehovah's Witness, I would read all of this. I would watch all of this, even teach all of this that embarrasses me, using Noah as an example. Then I would go home, look in the mirror, and look at my fellow Jehovah's Witnesses and wonder, what the hell are we all doing? What are we doing? We should all be full-time pioneers. And even that isn't enough if we really, truly feel the urgency. I laugh at this now, but it also creates some emotional issues for me. Do I really believe this stuff? Did I really believe my school friends and neighbors are all in a burning house about to die? If I did, what was I doing? What was I doing with my time, my resources? But one of my favorite examples of Jehovah's Witness urgency in action is one most of us in the United States will know well. And I'm going to use this as just an example. Remember, the neighbor's house is on fire. You can hear children screaming, the dog barking, the parents are out cold, maybe they've choked out on the smoke, and lives need to be saved. But one of my favorite, all-time favorite examples of Jehovah's Witness urgency in action is this little thing we call, are you ready? The coffee break. The coffee break. Move over, Noah. Don't even try to mention capturing all the animal species, gathering the food for thousands of species, dropping trees and cutting them without modern-day tools, and then having to go out in field service in your spare time after a grueling 1 hour of sitting in a minivan, making return visits to empty homes or knocking on doors where no one answered, or slipping a tract under the welcome mat on the porch in a move that featured a grueling sense of urgency to save lives. We would then make our way to the local Starbucks or donut shop. It had been 60 minutes of life-saving work. I'm exhausted. Lives were on the line. We only had a few precious minutes each week to warn our neighbors that a fireball shower could start at any second, wiping out everyone and everything we knew, but nothing is coming between us, a warm scone, and a dark roast coffee. Nothing. Jehovah's Witnesses and urgency in field service. And if you think I'm exaggerating, think again. I was as guilty as anyone, mostly because I hated field service. That territory map, my book bag filled with magazines, and that ticking clock all served as reminders that this was a very urgent work. But if you want to see true urgency, come between a Jehovah's Witness, their dark roast, and a donut. Try it. If you really want to see urgency, that's where you're going to see some emotion. The coffee break. It never gets old. It was absurd then, and now I just look back and you don't even get that in a place of employment. But 60 minutes and I'm fried. I need a donut. And look, every kid raised as a Jehovah's Witness and put through the living hell that was field service knows that the only thing that got them going and through the entire Saturday morning field service experience was knowing that if they just went 60 minutes, they got a hot chocolate and a donut. And would then pray that the adults would gossip long enough to push the clock toward noon, because when Jesus taught urgency, he was sure to mention that urgency only exists between the hours of 10 a.m. and 12 noon on a Saturday. Yes, in some long-lost Bible verse, Jesus commanded Jehovah's Witnesses to focus mainly on preaching during 2 hours on a Saturday morning, and they could knock off from this urgent work at noon. Have you ever, or was I alone, ever wondered where all of that came from? Where did it come from? We're saving lives only between the hours of 10 and 12 on a Saturday morning, broken up by a donut. Am I alone? I knew this as a kid, and you're damn right I knew it as an adult. 2 hours of misery to get through to Saturday afternoon. A brief reprieve where we might be able to enjoy life for a few hours, that meaning Saturday evening. You guessed it, because the Sunday meeting was right around the corner. We spent Saturday morning doing a work that was just insanely stupid. We got a few hours Saturday night. Sunday, it starts all over again. It was all very urgent. Urgent. And well, even now, I wonder how Jehovah's Witnesses justify a token hour and a half every weekend, but they count it as 2. The coffee break counts if you talk about Jehovah, because someone said the word Jehovah in between donut bites, so they could count the coffee break too. I'm pioneering after all. Still looking for that landmark moment where Jesus and his apostles did any of this. You'd think there would be at least one story, one parable, one verse, because, well, there weren't many Starbucks back there in the first century. It's incredible, and I could go on for an hour at the absurdity of this. I felt this way as a Jehovah's Witness, and I was as guilty as anyone in partaking in it. God, please just get me to Starbucks. This is terrible. But moving on from the coffee break, which I feel like I could talk about for a day, let me ask you about the Bible study arrangement as part of the preaching work. How urgent was that? How many did you have? How many were you conducting? You're on the clock. A fireball could come through the ceiling at any moment. And you're conducting a Bible study. Did the study feature urgency? Or did you kind of show up to the householder's house, the student's house, and discuss their garden for a solid 25 minutes, cover a couple of paragraphs, and then bolt? Don't try to act like this is news to anyone. It's the modern day Bible study arrangement of Jehovah's Witnesses, if you can even find one. But aside from how ridiculous this all is, it's still true, folks. This is just an honest set of observations, and I hope you're laughing along. Hope I'm not irritating some. Jehovah's Witnesses live on pins and needles. Urgency defines their every move. But somebody, and we don't know who, made up the Saturday service window and made the cutoff at 12 noon. I guess they were hoping Armageddon would hit by 12:01 or maybe by 11:30. Nope, time to pack it in. It's noon. But remember, and it's undeniable, we are all depending on their sense of urgency and deep love for us as their neighbor to find us anywhere and everywhere we might be. It drives their lives when they awaken every day, right? Jehovah's Witnesses are alone, blessed with Holy Spirit, and we are to feed off their sense of urgency in their message, in their energy, all of it, right? And does time even allow me to go off on this whole book cart thing? Do I even have the time? Do I need a book cart episode? I probably do. Before you dismiss this as absurd, please don't. Please don't. Just give it some thought. Really watch this in action. Okay, I'll give you that Jesus had not set up his publishing company yet in a yet undiscovered New York, USA. But can you imagine Jesus standing in the courtyard of Jerusalem in front of some scrolls, just hoping someone sensed the urgency of the scroll? Just hoping someone would glance down and go, that scroll looks urgent. Can you just feel the urgency? Him and his apostles urgently standing in front of some scrolls gives us all new meaning to actively saving lives, doesn't it? Jehovah's Witnesses and book carts. Let's prop one up, let's throw out some pubs, and let's stand there. The world's burning. Everyone we can see visually is about to die. Hey, look at my book cart. And listen, if you're a Jehovah's Witness listening, thank you, sincerely, thank you for being here. You're always welcome. Please stay if I don't drive you crazy. But allow me to respectfully ask a witness listening. When you personally go out in field service or just wake up in the morning, do you feel an overwhelming sense of urgency to save lives? Is that the first thing that pops into your head? Or is the first thing I got to get to the bathroom and pee? Is it life-saving work that drives you? Does it just burn in your soul? Look, there's a few out there that are. Do all they can within the parameters of that organization. But for the common J-Dub, is that something you're experiencing? Do you have that feeling like you're witnessing a house burn to the ground next door and there's people in there? Do you have that emotion when you wake up every day? I'll let you answer that. We can make jokes and have some laughs, but here's the thing. It's all undeniable. The sole purpose of a Jehovah's Witness is to save lives. The governing body tells all of us that the only reason we are still dealing with the misery, pain, and death of our roommate, Satan the devil, is because Jehovah wants to save as many lives as possible, and he is wholly dependent on Jehovah's Witness publishers to do that, with a little help from invisible angels that seem to have a miserable success rate, I might add. Everything we see, touch, and breathe should be dripping in urgency if we're a Jehovah's Witness. That sense of urgency should be coursing through our veins. And well, how do I say this? It's not. And I think if a witness is being as honest as humanly possible, one that might be here, they would admit it. We talked about meetings, we talked about field service. But just look at them. Just observe a witness. Watch the book cart brigade in your local park. The book carts, by the way, I should have said, were the last straw. It almost feels like the governing body is trolling people now. Can you imagine their thought process? Well, they just kept walking by. They didn't grab a book, kill them. That's it, folks. You can chalk it up any way you want it. They popped up a book cart and they feel like they're living up to their commission that Jesus gave them. He had nowhere to lay his head. He talked to everyone, including apostates. He never slept. He was exhausted all the time. He was raising people from the dead. They think popping up a book cart is urgent. A typical Jehovah's Witness answer to a question now is take a book or check the website. And I got to say, the book carts were the final blow to the facade that they're even educated or even care. The house is on fire. And well, they're in the front yard tossing a cup of water on the inferno while they talk about their fellow publisher's latest TikTok post. If that doesn't convince you that they're all checked out, go ahead and attend that meeting I mentioned. Talk to a Jehovah's Witness about their daily plans and emotions. I was a witness most of my life, and I can confirm right here and now, the sense of urgency isn't there. I saw more urgency from the person who held their pee for the first hour of door knocking in field service, and they ran to the coffee shop bathroom when we got on break. That was the most urgency I saw in the preaching work. And I got to tell you, the book carts are the final straw. They're just the final straw. But one more. How about one more? You feel up to it? This is a long one. What does urgency look like as an overall organization? What a deserving question. You'll be happy to know that when you're about to burn down your house, it's seen as smart and practical to make some additions, adding rooms and bathrooms, even as the fire is burning the house down. Nothing, and I mean nothing, screams urgency. Lives are on the line, people are about to die, and we are here to save every precious person like the following. Under the article, construction projects. Do I even begin here? We'll come back. Construction projects. Let's start there. Construction projects when the world's about to end? I guess look, I'm going to give you some breaking news here. And we talk about him. They told us to look at him and watch him. It's a little known fact that while Noah was preparing for the destruction of the planet by means of a flood, he was building a luxury mansion on the side. It's not found in the Bible, but just trust me, he was. It's not recorded there. The governing body tells us that the last days are like the days of Noah. You remember. And well, they're building things. They're building a lot of things. Instead of spending every waking moment warning individual souls that they're about to be burned to death or washed away in a flood or swallowed by an earthquake that they get to navigate, they're building things. But let's stick with Noah for a second, as well as Matthew 24, the description by Jesus from the outset. Who can forget verses 37 through 39 of Matthew 24? See if you notice anything here. It says there, quote, "For just as the days of Noah were, so the presence of the Son of Man will be. For as they were in those days before the flood, eating and drinking, men marrying and women being given in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and they took no note until the flood came and swept them all away. So the presence of the Son of Man will be." End quote. Huh. Wow. You mean people were distracted with other things and projects? Well, that couldn't be the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses they're talking about, right? No, it couldn't be. To be fair, Jesus didn't mention the multi-million-dollar construction projects that he was leading in those verses, so maybe they don't qualify, right? You could still be urgently saving lives and accumulating some nice furniture for the house that's burning to the ground, right? And now back to their website. Under the About Us activities, construction projects I aforementioned, under the article, they ask for work but not for pay. Nothing like promoting the fact that you give free labor. Unbelievable. It says this, quote, "Over the past 28 years, more than 11,000 of Jehovah's Witnesses have left their homes and even the country where they live to construct buildings in 120 countries. All have happily donated their skill and energy full-time without pay." There's a problem right there. Many paid their own way to get to the project. Some used their vacation to work. Others took a leave from their regular employment, forfeiting considerable income. To organize and coordinate this effort, an international program was set up in 1985, the year I graduated high school, I might add, and was baptized. It continues from the same page under Farms That Feed Millions, currently featured on their website if you'd like to go read this. Quote, "In 2004, the Brooklyn Printery was closed, and for the first time, books began to be produced at Wallkill. Today, Wallkill's Printery is a highly automated, state-of-the-art facility staffed by some 280 willing men and women. Last year, over 17 million books, undoubtedly for the book carts, and Bibles were produced there. In addition to the Wallkill, Canada, and Mexico printeries in North America, Jehovah's Witnesses have 12 other printeries located in Africa, Asia, Australia, Europe, and South America, all driven by free labor. That was not part of the quote. A lot of big numbers in this, huh? Construction projects as the house burns to the ground, shifting furniture on the deck of the Titanic. And now for a peek into my mind. Join me there for a few minutes. It's scary. We are discussing urgency. And well, I did some quick math. I'm terrible at it. Somebody check it. This is just for fun because when you're here to save lives, having fun is the order of the day, right? But in all of those statistics, I'll pick out one. Wallkill has 280 people pumping out literature, which makes them money via donations, oftentimes by the same volunteers printing the books are the same ones paying for the books. It never gets old, the absurdity. But I just took those 280 people and I multiplied them by 40 hours a week, multiplied that by 52 weeks a year, and I came to 582,400 hours free labor. And well, those hours translate into 24,267 days, or a whopping 66 years. Not out saving lives, mind you. Those 280 people aren't using 66 years of their life to save a single soul like Jesus did, the king of this whole operation, but printing books for the 9 guys in upstate New York to hand out, get money for, or pay from your own money in bank, print more magazines, hand out more magazines, get more money, print more magazines, hand out more magazines, get more money, print more. It's all very urgent, isn't it? It's all very urgent. Precious hours, people, and lives. It's also urgent. And feel free to check my math. I suck at it. But when I did those quick numbers, I immediately let myself drift to my guy Noah. You remember the guy Jesus pointed to for comparison on what Jehovah's Witnesses should be doing during the last days. Poor Noah only had 8 people, including himself, to build an ark, save all animal life, save all human life, all without a page of literature, including a Bible or a book cart. No pressure there. And well, I imagine him standing there in Wallkill today, watching people make books instead of being out pleading with people day and night to listen so they could live forever. I pictured Jeffrey Jackson and Sam Hurd standing there proudly showing Noah what they were doing with their limited time left in the last days. And then I pictured the man who also found time to make babies at 500 years old turn and bitch slap them both. I'm sorry. It's a little crass, but it's true. I tried to picture him saying it in Hebrew because, that's what they said, we're told. But nonetheless, I imagined him saying, everyone that came out of his loins is about to die again, a second time. He already watched the planet drown, including babies. But now he went on procreating. We're all still here. And you guys, watching all the civilization that came out of me and my wife after the flood, you guys are making books? You're building buildings? What? 280 people in Wallkill that could be out warning people hour after hour, day after day, but you guys are making magazines and making a new factory. I couldn't help but notice that just as in my day, so you're all sitting up there, eating, drinking, marrying, and being given in marriage. Wait a minute, this all sounds so familiar. The absurdity. If you're a witness listening, the absurdity. All of us inch closer to being murdered. Jehovah's Witnesses are proud to share with you that 280 of them spend their every waking hour making books, talking about how we're all inching closer to being murdered. It's a giant circle jerk. And folks, this is just one example and one location. I just picked one. And as you know, there are many more Jehovah's Witnesses urgently producing books and magazines. You can find them under a pile of lint at your local laundromat. It's a placement. I wonder how many lives could be saved if those 280 people in Wallkill were focused on saving lives in person, not building buildings and making books. Let's ask Noah. Oh, wait, never mind. He's a little bitter. He was just one guy, and, well, his success rate wasn't very good either. I've hopefully given you some things to think about when considering Jehovah's Witnesses and the topic of urgency. But in conclusion, as I do, I want to throw in one of my favorite random thoughts from the corners of my mind throughout the decades that I desperately want to go deeper into. I've mentioned it before, but this is one of those things that was a massive, massive indicator for me of the lack of urgency in Jehovah's Witnesses. And it's very intimate. This one's intimate, in my opinion. There may not be more, here's the random thought, folks. Warning, random thoughts with Stacy. There may not be a more glaring proof that Jehovah's Witnesses have zero sense of urgency than to watch Jehovah's Witness parents living life when their children they raised in the organization decide to not be a baptized Jehovah's Witness. It has to be one of the most devastating and at the same time funniest, most absurd dynamics to watch. You know the parents I'm speaking of. They claim to be Jehovah's Witnesses. Their kids grow up and completely reject baptism and becoming a witness, and the parents go on still associating with them and carry on without a worry in the world. There it is. Their own children thumbing their nose at Jehovah's guys and guaranteeing that they will be killed at Armageddon. It's in print. But despite the parents grossly disobeying the Bible principles and governing body council by continuing to associate with these kids that rejected the organization, believing they found a loophole since the kids were never baptized at a circuit assembly, never mind that the parent never stops to consider their abject failure as a parent to raise their kids to love Jehovah. But the most damning behavior and proof Jehovah's Witnesses lack urgency to me is right there. Those same parents aren't acting, with vehement urgency to save their own kids. It's the most unnatural, disturbing thing you'll ever watch. It's absurd. They're just posting pictures of them all on vacation together on Instagram. Life just goes on. There's no sense of urgency in those parents at all. There's no sense of urgency to get their kids to reconsider and be a Jehovah's Witness. They're going on camping trips with the same kids this weekend, all of it proving that the parent has no sense of urgency that the kids they failed personally to raise to love Jehovah are about to die any second now. They subconsciously don't believe any of it at all. The parents clearly don't read their own literature or listen to the talks at the convention, annual meetings, JW Broadcasting. The governing body has proclaimed that those adult kids now are dead man walking. But you sure wouldn't know it looking at the Jehovah's Witness parents and the way they treat those kids. They just carry on. I see it all the time on social media, people I know. They carry on with those kids that they failed to raise as a witness, that has rejected the organization, has worldly boyfriends and girlfriends, parties it up. They just keep associating with them because they never got in a pool at the circuit assembly. It's a loophole, but it isn't. And it's in print everywhere. And in all honesty, it's comical because it is the most damning, disturbing, unnatural indicator that they all lack urgency. It's your own kids. It's your own kids. But the resounding question is always the same. Why do Jehovah's people have no urgency? Let's let them answer the question themselves. In the Life and Ministry Meeting Workbook, January to February 2023, it's on the website right now, folks. We get this. For many decades, Jehovah has been warning Earth's inhabitants that he will execute judgment on the ungodly people. It says, ask yourself, do I take advantage of every opportunity to help others heed God's warning? End quote. I'm here to tell you the answer is clear. It's clear. It's a resounding no. They don't. There is simply no way any and all Jehovah's Witnesses could look anyone in the eye and say that they are consumed with a sense of urgency and a need to save lives. No, Jehovah's Witnesses do not use every opportunity to save lives. They don't. And anyone that looks at you and says they do is lying. Their whole lives would be consumed with this. They'd be drowning in it. They'd launch from their bed the way you would if you could smell the fire burning next door. They're out living the same lives everyone else is, with the addition of professing that their sole purpose in life is to save you and me. And they actually look you in the eye and say it with a straight face. But there's zero sense of urgency. I gave just a few examples. People, the reality is this. The house, in this case, the planet Earth, it's on fire. It's on fire. Millions of us are trapped inside. They have seconds, all of us have seconds to escape or die. Those are their words, not mine. It starts in the Bible. It comes through all their literature from the governing body. How are Jehovah's Witnesses reacting? Are their lives consumed with saving the rest of us from everlasting destruction? Do they feel the urgency in their gut, in their body, in their heart? Do you witness them making the sacrifices anyone would make to run headlong into that burning house to save lives? The answers may vary, but I don't think by much. When you take the time to slow down and just observe the lives of Jehovah's Witnesses, in my opinion, you're left with only one question. Do they really believe the house is burning at all? I want to thank you all for listening. Wherever you may be, urgently be well.